Hi Budcake. Today I want to take a meandering view through design problems that I've encountered in my live system and how this kind of latest iteration is my attempt to try and address some of them. I'll recap kind of how it all works, and then if you look in the description though, I will put chapter markers to all of the various topics that we covered, so if there's aspects you're more interested in, please feel free to skip around. This will be long and meandering. It's a deep subject. There's lots to cover, and we're definitely not there yet. So any insight thoughts that you have, please leave them. I need them, because this thing could go in any number of directions. So in a nutshell, as to what I actually have in this system, I kind of am working with 3 main voices, 3 effects, some percussion, and lots of ways to mix and control those elements. I have, of late, been playing with the Lyra 8, which is amazing. And if you watch my recent set that was at the Wishbone Brewery, you can see this similar-ish system to this being played, accompanied by the Lyra. Interestingly, I was 1 voice down, and I'll talk about what. So, first thing, I have a bass line, which is made from the IntelliJ Dixie and the SEM filter. I used to use the Z2040, and I will almost certainly go back because I love the tip-top Z2040. I have chords and other variable things from the mutable plats going through the Jove filter. And then a 303. This is new. So I had a voice that was made from the MCO and the SEM filter, which was acidy and 303-ish, but I've actually acquired the Acid Lab M303, and it's great. So, and currently I don't have this set up, but I will have it so that I can feed the MCO into the M303. This is all the M303's own. You can see I'm controlling it with these LS1 light strips. These are amazing. I can control the filter of the 303, and I can record that motion. Which is great. So, 3 voices. That bass, blah, 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 which I often have kind of softer and lower. I can control its length here. And then this platsy voice. Then we have percussion. So a kick here. Which is the Prok from Thonk, which kills. I'll turn off the bass line. And then Prok snare. And then Prok hats, which are great. So nice having the Prok drums because they're malleable. I can make them go short and long, which I can't with samples. On the subject of samples, I now have the ALM Squid Sample, which is amazing. I would almost go so far as to say it's overwhelming because you have 8 samples, 3 of which can be pitched, and then 5 of which just play. So then I have 3 effects as well. Those are the Soundhack Mimeophone, the Tip Top Z5000, and the Mutable Clouds. So that's the 303. This is the Mimeophone. Which is a delay. A delay. It's many things, but it's kind of a delay. And clockable. Z5000 from Tip Top, which is new. Which I've got doing lush reverb, which it does very well. It has delays and it has pitch effects as well, like choruses. It's a really good multi-effect to have in a system like this. Just kind of covers all your bases. You know, if you've got like another dedicated module, maybe for reverb or delay. And then clouds, which I've kind of got chopping up vocals. And it's here on send 1, and it's pre-fader, so I can send things completely wet. So for example, I could turn off and send the 303 to it. So it kind of gives me freaky noises, which is cool. So yeah, 3 voices, some percussion, 3 effects. Simple enough? Yeah. It's an interesting one. Like, how much do you need to play? 3 voices is nice because it gives you that thing of like, if 2 voices are doing something, I've got the third that I can fade in, you know, like I can have a low fuzz bass with plats and then be bringing in like acid on the M303. So 3 is kind of the magic number for me personally. But you could just be leaving that one voice out in the open and manipulating it in real time. I find it's, you know, the nature of this system is that you have to embrace the slow progression. So that means fading things in slowly and not doing like super fast changes. And this brings us to sort of changes of things. You can see ergonomically, things have moved around a little if you've been paying attention. And one of the main things is I've got this kind of high-sided case. And it is one of those things that you don't notice if you're on, you know, modular grid or whatever and laying out a system. Sometimes it's tempting to put things right at the edge. But on a system like this, it's actually quite hard for me to access stuff that's right at the edge. So I've put all of the like unity mixing and the sort of plumbing, things like Pamela's Workout, which is the main clock for the system. Those are all out at the edges. And then I do have an ergonomic issue, which is this massive, enormous bundle of cables, which is slightly difficult to get round. And what I have under here are the DivKid mute modules, which are fantastic, but they're quite hard to see. That is a problem. There is no getting around it. I don't want these here, really. And what I would ideally have is them here and probably swap the Turing Machine. But I put the Turing Machine there partly to force myself to sort of use it more. It's based on the fact that in a previous video, you'll see me talking about how I've constructed this bass line, which is in here. So the bass line is constructed with Euclidean modules being modulated by a Turing Machine. And I can just turn up the steps. Kind of works well enough. But I don't know, I still don't interact with it enough. The Turing Machine is a large module as well, and really the mutes will be better there. It's just something that you can only work out from playtesting the things, but it's also a real pain in the ass to like reorganize things once you've committed to a certain layout. As well, also, you're building muscle memory, and it's always annoying to move things because you totally mess that up. I would certainly say it's nice having all my percussion groups. I kind of come to there and can do all my percussion changes. I'm thinking about percussion at one time. It doesn't make sense to spread it out amongst the case. That just makes life a pain. So speaking in terms of controlling percussion, this is kind of one of the biggest things that I had an issue with in the previous versions of this case, like controlling percussion quickly. And it is something that I am still massively working on. I have... My main beef was the fact that I had lots and lots of percussion and it's hard to shut it off quickly in groups. And so what I've done is I've kind of reorganized my mixer, and I've used the DivKid mutes modules to give myself hopefully more control. I say hopefully, I mean, there is a sort of more grouped control now. And in order to make that happen, I've had to like put the bassline onto a shared mixer control. So basically, channel 1 contains both my subby bass and my kick. And I've got a DivKid mute module so that I can have just the kick or just the bass. But unfortunately it's hidden under this little mess, which is not ideal. But having that grouping means that I've got snares and stuff and hats and stuff under 2 completely separate channels, because I wanted to just be able to, like, there's a point where you can easily have like tons of things going on. So I've got lots of hatty things, and I've got lots of Squid Salmple-y things, and I've got snares. And basically I just want to strip down the hats. So I've broken it down, and then I can shut off a lot of this stuff and build it back up again from a square one. And so it was important to sort of separate these things out. And I must say, I still don't feel completely comfortable in terms of being in control. Like, for example, I also have the DivKid mutes here, which is controlling the grouped 4 outputs of the Squid Sample. And I don't know, I'm just sort of like, I'm not quite there in terms of what they do, in terms of their like functions and things. Do have control of them. Sure. I mean, it's amazing. The sample is incredible. Like, the amount of possibilities with having 8 samples, especially the fact that these 3 can be pitched, is completely bananas. And I would genuinely say it is almost overwhelming. One thing that I've been thinking I need to do, and like a good solution to this problem, like I currently have, I would love it to just have to have 8 knobs of grids. If grids had 8 knobs, I would be so happy. And if they were all interrelated, interesting patterns, and I could just have more of them, that would be incredible. But that doesn't exist. Grids is only 3. And I've spoken to Emily about like remapping the like knobs to do different things, i.e. to like have different types of patterns and stuff. So I didn't necessarily have to use this like channel 1 for kick drums. And she said it's just not really that easy to do. So I have considered the idea of having the second grids and then time shifting the reset of the second grid so that I can use it for like ancillary percussion, and I may come to that. The other thought is there are a couple of modules which were basically, the dream I had was a module that had 3 inputs and 8 or whatever, 3, 6, 9 outputs, and allowed me with switches to just send them to different places like you would do on a switch mult, but kind of flip their assignments so they would just they would all just jump around. Do you know if that making any sense? So I would have 3 sources, and by flipping them, I could send them to any of the 8 destinations or 9 destinations. There is basically a module that does that. I can't think what it's called now. I'm going to put a link to it in the description, but I don't have it. And of course, the other one is the switch mult, the humble switch mult, which you can use to sort of reroute certain things. It will probably be in the short term that I will use switch mults, meaning that I could kind of do this. So if I turn off all of the procky stuff, so this is just Squid, so there's so many interesting little things. Okay, effects. Nice. Nice. So that's then prop kick, but Squid Sample for everything else, which sounds wicked. And so what I want to be able to do is mid-set, I want the grids to stop doing 1, 2, 3 and start doing 4, 5, 6, that kind of thing. So basically what I'm getting at is it's an almost overwhelming amount of possibilities that a Squid Sample presents, and part of using it well is going to be how I feed it. And I'm not there yet. I am also using the outputs of the Euclidean circles with my sequential switch to generate some of the percussion that will go to 6, 7, and 8. In fact, actually 6 is just being direct routed from channel 4 on the Euclidean circles. And what I've started to do is use the other 3 outputs of the Euclidean circles. So Euclidean circles being the drum, like percussion making thing. If you set it up, you can actually output 6 drums. So this would be 4 here. So you can have other stuff going on. Ace. And now let's talk about kick patterns while we're on the subject. So this I would say is an absolute win. So this is something that genuinely has worked beautifully. I've got multiple sequential switches. So I said before I've got the one that I'm using for like 7 and 8 actually, channel 7 and 8, to send incidental drums into them. But I have another one, and that is controlling my kick pattern. Listen to the kick. There's like a nice call and response. Do, 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 do. Which, like, I was so delighted when I discovered this. And here's how it's done. So, I'm now generating my kick pattern with 2 modules. One is Euclidean circles. So this first 16 steps is this Euclidean circles. And the second 16 steps is being generated by a 2HP Euclid module, which is here. And then I'm using a sequential switch up here to flip between the 2 sources and send them to the Prok. So look, that's one and that's the other. And in this way, and by the way, I'm triggering that with a nice, like, on the beat, every bar trigger from Pamela's workout. So every bar, like clockwork, Pamela says, now you send this Euclidean circles to the kick drum. Next bar, now you send the Euclidean module. And it means that by just changing, doom, 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 that's Euclidean circles. So I could change that, totally silent, doom, 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 or fill it up, doom, 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 doom. Okay, so Euclidean circles is doing a straight 4/4, and now if I go on the Euclid module, change the steps. I mean, it is ridiculous how obvious that is to me in hindsight, but how amazingly well it works in practice. But yeah, kick patterns that are more interesting use a sequential switch and flip between two sources. And also, it's really easy to manipulate because it's just turning dials. It's the turning dial system, which I've used with grids and Euclidean circles. I've tried to make all of the things that I actually generate the patterns with very immediate and turny. So it's more of that. Good. Another thing that I wanted to do was something that is in the video that I made about sample and hold modules, where at the end of the video, I show my live system and I use a sample and hold module to create held sustained notes. And I'm actually doing that now using the Disting from the beautiful people at Expert Sleepers. Well, the beautiful man. Everyone's favourite multifunction module, I would also posit to say, is probably the best sample and hold for your money in all of Eurorack, because I have tried a number of other sample and hold modules. Unfortunately, this is the only one that I found, with the exception of the Jaw Analog one, which is made with that specific purpose in mind, which does not have unacceptable voltage drop. So what I mean is, so this is Platt. I'll just try and make this sound a little bit less sort of bonkers. So what's happening here is that I'm sending a Metropolis to Platts to control its pitch, but I'm going through the sample and hold. And every time this little gate sequencer triggers here, it will hold the note that Platts is at, basically. So if you listen to the 303, it's jumping all over the place, but Platts is not. But Platts is being fed from the same voltages, it's getting the same voltages that the 303 is. Although that's not true. I'm tapping them and sampling and holding them. And in this way, then I can therefore have Platts just playing Platts toed, like leveled kind of pitches. And I can do sort of slow attack, kind of paddy. Just sound lovely. See? Do you think I'd be making this if I'd never heard like selected ambient works, or how much is me doing the music and how much is the system suggesting it to me and me just responding to it? But yeah, you get the idea. So Platts is now able to do long sustains, and let me just save you the trouble of looking around and telling you that Disting is the most stable sample and hold module to do that with. Others droop. It doesn't. It's digitally controlled, so it remains the same pitch like constantly. It's really good. And you can use the really old version of it. You don't need like the latest version. So even if you just buy it as a sample and hold module, it's one of the best for this. Oh, quick thing I forgot to mention about the kick patterns, which is going to be a benefit for you, brave warrior who just sits and watches the video rather than skips around, which is that if I want to just have a straight 4/4, it's quite hard to do that because you would have to set up Euclidean circles to do like a 4/4, and you would also have to set up the 2HP Euclid to do a straight 4/4, which is not necessarily a trivial thing to do, although there are settings that you can get it into a 4/4 with. But what I would say, what I have done is pull the trig. You just pull the trig out at the correct moment, which is kind of ridiculous. You could use a DivKid mutes to do that and pull it, but it's a bit annoying. Ideally you'd send it a reset, one of those things that is not ideal, but is doable. Like by pulling a cable, I can stop it from moving on, so I can just use Euclidean circles and just do some straight 4/4s. That's definitely one of those things where you're just like, I wish there was an easier way of doing this. Now, I was talking about the clock divider here, and it was one of the sort of things I was trying to do was like create longer musical passages. I'm using the sequential switch down here in order to create the incidental percussion that triggers 7 and 8 on the Squid Sample. I'm not sure why 7 is not being triggered, not like that reliably anyway. It might just be the frequency of the thing that is, which is this. Oh, there you go. Yeah. So, so this is something I've done before. I'm using a sequential switch, and I'm using the 3 and 4 outputs from the sequential switch to go into 7 and 8 of the Squid Sample. And I'm sending a little percussion riff in here, and I'm using a pattern on Pamela's workout to advance it slowly, so that bit by bit, eventually, it reaches 7 and 8. But it doesn't do it repeatedly every single bar. There's a gap, and then it gets to them. I'm incidentally triggering these less frequently than I would if I was just hitting them constantly with gate patterns, like I actually am on channel 4 of the Euclidean Circles here. So that's this. And so it's this idea of like incidentally triggered percussion, something I would like to have more of. And what I did originally before I like shot this video, like one of the previous things I tried was using this clock module, which is the Ladic S50 Clockworks. And I was using it to clock the Metropolis and the grids individually. And I was doing that so that I could slow down Metropolis and slow down grids, which is triggering the Squid. And my feeling was that I would be able to have like, by slowing it down, you would get even more of that good incidental clocking and, you know, incidental triggering. But I have to say that it just, yes, you could get it to do that. But what would happen when you got it on a clock division, which just wasn't really musically joyful, then the entire module would just be making kind of shittily incidental percussion. It just wouldn't have the satisfying division that you would want it to have. And it just didn't really work, especially also the Metropolis. Because I was sort of triggering the 303 voice from it, it would become very, very slow and kind of turgid. And I just find it's actually better to do that on the Metropolis, with the Metropolis being clocked at full whack. On Metropolis, you know, if I'm actually in command of the sequencer and like concentrating on what I'm doing, you know, so here, that's it. I can throw up these faders and create 8-bar passages with the correct pulse count, which is something I've been doing quite a bit of. So you can start to build like long passages using Metropolis. You just use long counts, and then you have it in forward, and you have like high pulse counts. So if you do 64, like that. So yeah, like using clocking as a way of like adjusting the overall kind of timing of the system, like it can work, but it's hard. And I would say it's better to just like use sequences that you can have longer passages for or with, if you design them that way or if you set them up that way. And it's totally possible in Metropolis, you know. Sure, it's just the same repeating thing, but this is dance music. Like, it doesn't need to like do loads of cool and interesting things every bar, you know. That can be satisfying musically. And if I want to have a like really like junky sort of like acid sequence, then I knock the pulses down to like 3, and then like always just like pulse to 3. It's just like that happy amount. And then you can still use like long passages, because if I clock plats at a slower rate, you know, with this clocking thing, then I get my sustains. So yeah, so another way of having like longer like call and response style sequences, which is something that I haven't tried, but I would highly recommend that you do, and it's something I may end up doing, is use a VCA and program something into Pamela's new workout where the VCA is being thrown open every second bar, or like, you know, at the end of 8 bars, you know, it gets thrown open at that point fully for the length of the bar and then closed again. And then what you do is feed some weird percussion through that, so that your weird percussion is being VCA'd open only at the time that you decree. And by using Pamela's workout, it becomes really easy to have like clock division, sort of, you know, it happens every second bar or every like fourth. I think so. Anyway, it should be possible. You can also use logic modules with AND. So you can send something through a logic module with AND, so that if that is open and the other one is making a gate, then it will let the thing through. So Logic can do it too. I've got some space here. Thanks, guys, from Afrorack, but I might have to set that out and put in some kind of other way of controlling maybe like channels 4 and 5 of the Squid. There's something to be done there. But I'm just cautious, because without sounding boring, and this isn't like the most exciting thing to talk about, but it's important, is like not having so much stuff going on where you're like, Christ, there's like all of these little noises happening. What's triggering that one weird noise? Is it this? Is it that? Is it shit? What is it? That's what you want to avoid. So do you need all those voices? I don't know. Maybe you do. But just, it's not, yeah, it's making them manageable. That's the real challenge. So one of the other things was like obscuring and texturizing vocals. So I was talking to my friend Sebastian Rochard at Arturia. I sent him my set and he was like, yeah, it's okay, but like those voices that just keep going on and on in the background are really annoying. Fair enough. I like them. And other people have commented on this as well. I love you all. It's totally fine. But yeah, like having like a sort of repeating like, you know, voice. I really, really enjoy using voices like this, which is a tiny like snippet of my great uncle, very old man who's very dead. He's got this amazing posh voice, and that's being triggered by Euclidean Circles. I think this one here, channel 6, I guess. Yeah. That's my grandfather. And that, can you hear that noise in the background?
But of course, output here was actually a Lightfoot's product, wasn't it?
It wasn't.
There.
So the steel of the old Peculiar was Lightfoot.
There.
That's what I mean.
The steel
Yes.
belonged to Lightfoot.
That is my father's long-lost dog, Sweep, who was snoring in the background.
I'm not sure.
That.
Oh.
This was recorded in like 1963 or something. I think it's kind of amazing. Sweep snores through clouds. Yeah, that's the new Rings into Clouds. What Sebastian suggested, and what he's absolutely right, is like, you know, you can use like this vocal material as a kind of freaky noises generator in a much more sort of like better way. I don't want to think of a word other than better. But so what's happening here is, by virtue of the fact that the Bifaco hex mix that I use, which is the best mixer in all of Eurorack as far as I'm concerned, sorry other people who make mixers, but this just is the best arrangement I have found so far. The 3 sends can be pre or post fader, and that means that I can have that channel of great uncle speech and sweeps snoring completely silent, but give you the totally wet effect. So I'm turning this up, you're hearing the totally wet clouds. And I can do that with any of the channels because they're all set up that way. So that's the 303, and then there'll be plats. And then, like, you know, Emily Gillet has always said, you should modulate clouds. And so I am modulating clouds, and I'm using my friend DivKid's Ochd module to do it. Now, I think I have got the density, which is the knob that kind of controls the amount of actual, like, sound that clouds lets through. I'm fairly sure that I'm giving it a pattern. I think it's probably one of the patterns from here. Probably this one. No, it's not. This is fun, isn't it? Let's play Trace the Cable. Where is it? No. So it's actually, I'm feeding it just a steady, like, 8th clock from Pamela, so that it's being triggered reliably, although it isn't making sound there. And that will, like, regularly trig it, so that it's creating a rhythmic chop. And then, like, various things like position and texture are being controlled by the DivKid Ochd modulation module, which is very, 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 very good. You know what the Ochd is. It's 8 free-running LFOs, which you can send to all manner of different things. And I am sending it to sort of a variety of different things. And it has just one master knob to sweep the response of all of the 8 outputs. So it's perfect for something like this, where you're just like, I just want to send some modulation into clouds, so that clouds is just kind of doing interesting stuff. But if I pull this and have, like, density, it's nice. It'll just do, like, different things and just kind of chop away in the background and just make interesting things and be modulated by the Ochd. There's more to be done with this, but it just gives you that interest. I think it's that freaky noises concept. You need some kind of interest, and that could also be like, you could be using radio music and just have, like, noise, like shh, or like vinyl crackle and stuff. And I've actually done that and have experimented with it. Although it's, you know, on a big system, when you're playing out, it's negligible how much of that would actually get noticed by people. But it's a way. And by doing that, you have that kind of like textural interest, that sort of like John Hopkins-y, Boards of Canada-y, sort of warm, fuzzy, crackly vibe. Maybe better on headphones than on a sound system. But if you want to have texture, then that's a way of doing it. Then this is like another way, just having incidental little things that are just happening in the background. You need some of them. I should talk a tiny bit about cable management. As you can see, I don't really have any. Well, that sort of is not true. I bought these little things off Amazon, which are like little Twisties. I will link to them. I've got an affiliate link. If you feel like giving me some money via Amazon by buying some of these, then you're very welcome to. But they're quite good. They're like little plastic things. I've never seen these before, and I sort of came across them. What's good about these is you can see that they sort of hold their shape. They're not like the kind of cable wrap ties, which I've got loads of. I don't have any to hand at the moment, but I've got about 1,000 of them in a drawer. But these are sort of very good because you can kind of twistify the cable in a very sort of satisfying way, and tight. I've not done that very well, but like this, you can sort of tightify the cable, and it's just very easy to then remove it and then sort of do something else. So I found these to be genuinely quite handy, and I've started using them, but I mean, the point is I pull this around quite a lot and unplug stuff, so we're not quite there. It's like a permanent arrangement, but these are good. And it does matter. Just having stuff so that it's clear and easy and accessible is hugely important, as is where you place things. We talked about that. But yeah, I recommend those, genuinely. They are very, very good. And I've never seen anything. No one gives these out. Like, and I've not seen anyone using these. So I don't know, maybe I discovered them. Maybe other people have been using them loads, but help yourself. Now, the other thing is something not in the case at all, but this little chestnut, the Lyra 8, which is a polyphonic synthesizer, which is kind of a perfect thing to combine with the modular, because it's sort of what I'm missing is that, like, what's what I've tried to get Platts to do, but doing that sort of like, you know, the pretty pad element. It's extraordinary as an instrument, and I'm not going to sort of like dig hugely into the Lyra obviously in this video, except to say I mention it in this context. Like, it's interesting having something like this that can kind of do like pads while this is like grooving along. And the key point and why this kind of works as a particular instrument is that these little like contacts and the little knobs above them, these are the keys, and the little knobs are tuning like dials, so I can tune each note, and I have to tune each note, otherwise it doesn't work. And what that means is that if you've picked a scale, like I've picked a scale, you know, and I've tuned my oscillators in relationship to each other, I'll talk about those in a sec, then you tune your Lyra to that scale, and it means that your Lyra, it's kind of foolproof to a degree. If you hit a little like connector, you're going to get a sound that is in tune with your modular, so it's kind of perfect. Because, of course, the modular can be so freely tuned, this also is freely tunable. It's microtonal, really, and I mean, this is, you can design your own scales. You know, there's 8 notes. The notes can be completely like their own scale. It's amazing. The Lyra is just an insane instrument. We haven't even talked about. So it has like its own delay built in, woo! Which I've made a video about. It's available as a Eurorack module. Oh, it's just like gnarly. It's like the most gnarly instrument. And Logic. Boop up up, boop up up. You can also make it short and not do pad. And then use the delay to do all like the mad stuff. Just a nuts instrument. So it's, yeah, I mean, what a perfect like modular accompaniment. But again, for the purposes of this video, it's just to highlight the fact that it's based on the tuning. It's like something that you can tune where everything's in scale. Actually, hang on. Let me show you something else. something you may wish to consider if that intrigues you as a concept, like i.e. things being in tune, is this, which is the MIDI Gal, made by Midicizer, but of course is actually a design from Emily Gillet again, which was originally called a MIDI Pal. Incidentally, let me just explain to you another Amazon affiliate link. The greatest thing that you can ever buy in your studio is one of these. This is a paint dusting brush for dusting down a surface before you paint it. Oh yeah, it's also, did you not know how you're supposed to dust like synth gear? Because a dusting brush can just get in between all of the knobs and cracks in a way that just you can't with any other dusting or with a Hoover. Like, it's insane. The day I got this was like the happiest day of my studio life. I've got another Amazon affiliate link to it below. Jesus, that makes me sound like such a shill for a brush. But trust me, your life is better when you've got one of these brushes. It truly is. MIDI Gal, what this does is it is a MIDI event processor. And basically the reason I bought this, and something that I'm intrigued to try, is using MIDI Gal to quantize to the scales that I'm using in the Metropolis, so that you can have like a key step and you can quantize the key step's output to a scale and then send it into a synth like the Peak or like something else, like a polysynth, or like the little Jupiter, which I've got here. The Jupiter, which I've got here. Yeah, it's just that idea of like accompaniment to your modular. The Lyra is just amazing as an instrument. But yeah, you may want to consider like analog polysynths and other things with a MIDI Gal. And so, yeah, one other thing I just wanted to mention finally, and then we're going to have a Q&A, is like my motto during practice as I've been playing around with this. It's taped on the wall. If I did a live set, like a stream set, which I'll link to, and I showed this at the end. Bring things in quickly, but don't take them away quickly. In quick, away slow. Which may be bleedingly obvious if you're a surgeon and you've played live for, played techno records for sort of 35 years. But yeah, bring things in quickly is fine, but don't just whip things out. I've definitely mentioned this before, but just, you can build things up fast. But if I pull the 303, it's kind of like taking the whole soul out of the tune. Because that Platts really isn't doing very much at the top there. And the rest is just like a semi-inspiring pattern. But it's not like funky and sort of groovy and danceable, really. So it's about like being careful, because it's a way of avoiding taking away the one element that is stitching your whole track together in front of a crowd that's really enjoying it. And it was my old English teacher who said, something along the lines of, give them time to enjoy it, but don't take it away the moment they start to enjoy it. In terms of pacing, he's talking about. And it's true, like, you can bring things in quickly and abruptly, but pulling things away, fading them out, is always a better way. It will avoid those mistakes of just taking away the thing that you need for your tune to work. Because you don't need much. That's literally just the 303 and the kick and some effects. Like that. Yeah. So, a Q&A. I had some questions that I invited people to ask, and they did. And so let's go through the questions. Number 1, Matthias asks, why so many mixers? You have lots of mixers. Jesse Merlin also asked, what's your Unity mixer doing? The reason I mean, like, the whole system is designed around, like, this mixer now, it seems. And I have said before, and I would agree again, that if I got rid of absolutely everything in my case, I would still keep this mixer exactly where it is and not change it. Your mixer is, like, absolutely one of the most important parts of playing live, because it's how you're controlling what's in and what's out, and effects, and the mix. It's hugely important, and this one is just kind of perfect. And so the other mixers, though, it's kind of maybe hard to see. Like in here, I have a Unity mixer, a couple of Unity mixers. And basically, in short, I'm using the Unity mixers to like pre-mix percussion and things and get them down so that I can actually fit them into the first 3 channels of this Bifaco hex mix. And even so, I have now used more channels to do my mixing. So I've like used more of the Bifaco channels, as it were, and I've done less submixing outside the case because I want immediate control, grouped control over the types of sounds that I have. But yeah, mixers basically combine all of my percussion together. They don't do any like clever modulation combining, but that might be worth exploring. We'll see. So Clayton Gray on Patreon asked, what are the DivKid mutes doing? And so I've got 2 of the DivKid mutes, and one of which is very simple to explain. It is literally controlling the 4 Squid Sample grouped out. So like on the Squid Sample, the outputs are all grouped. So 1 and 2, which are here controlled by the grids and need to be switched on, obviously. So that is 1 and 2, and they're actually on this top one here. So I can control this output with DivKid's mutes, and if I turn on the second one, that's 3 and 4, which should give us some of that. And if we were using 4, that also would come out. And then 5 and 6 are here. Ugh. What a great module. And then 8. Yeah. 7 and 8. Which are these little ones? Let's just try some other stuff as well. Ooh, this is a big one. It's taking ages. Oh my god. Oh, it's all tone. That's nuts. What is that one? Noise. I think that's Dave Burriston. Crazy. So yeah, sorry, in answer to your question, the DivKid mutes is controlling the outputs of the Squid Sample, which is important. There's so much stuff, you need to compartmentalize it. And then the other DivKid mutes, one of which controls the kick drum, bottom one here. The second one up controls the bass line, because I have those grouped on channel 1 now, I really need individual control, and it kind of sucks having them here back on the back of the case. I need them here, I should move them. And then the other DivKid, like DivKid's true intention with mutes and what he shows in his videos is using it to like send modulation around a case. Multed modulation being sent around a case is like literally what Ben's sort of design with that was. And I started doing a tiny bit of it, but not really. What I have done is this. So that's Platts, obviously. And if I turn this one on, you see this? Oh, look. Dodgy cables. Come on, mate. So that's Platts. And so then if I switch this one on, what that is it sends the Turing Machine pattern that controls my Euclidean, like the Euclidean module that controls my bass line, it sends it into Platts's model in. So suddenly Platts, the model input is getting like jumped around by this. Which kind of works, does things, does not things, in depending on which mode you have it on. So it's a bit of a like lottery. But you're likely to get kind of percussion-y stuff. Less. So you can get into like nuts territory. Well, that's quite good. Give that more delay. From the mimeophone. So yeah. And then off. And then on. So it's kind of hit and miss, but yeah, you see the idea. It's using like the mutes to send modulation around the case in interesting ways. And there's more to be done. Like that's just like, you know, something that occurs to you to try, and then it either sounds good or it doesn't. And I haven't honestly used that much in my practice. Like usually I don't want to mess with Platts. Like I just want it to keep doing the cool thing that it's doing without like jumping it around loads. But if you were embracing a weird moment, then that would be a good modulation. Andrew Soderlund on Patreon asks, how do you experiment with other tempos? And that is an absolutely fantastic question. And the answer is, I try. Like, there is a sort of thing I put on Patreon, which is sort of private, and I'm not sharing it with the rest of the world, but we're kind of trying this at lower tempos. Let's just try something and see. You know, this currently is at 137 BPM, you know, which is techno tempo, quite fast. Of course I can change that. I can slow it right down. So I could go to like 87. And the short answer is it gets pretty boring. Like the set I played at Wishbone Brewery, there's some of the stuff I didn't include at the start. I started at a lower tempo. I think I was on like 95 or something like that. Maybe it wasn't even that fast. I think it becomes like a thing of experience. So, which is to say, Andrew's question is, how do you experiment with other tempos? The answer is you just set it at other tempos. But the key point is that you practice your system at other tempos. So you're confident you know how to wrangle things. Like probably one of my big mistakes was to have the Metropolis on a slow sort of, a long sequence passage at a slow tempo. Like in a weird way, I would rather have it at a slightly faster sequence passage at a slower tempo. Well, we can try it. I mean, but it's sort of... that works. So this is actually sounding really good, which is annoying. But yeah, the answer is you practice at other tempos. I would say that I have really messed up some gigs where I played too slow. Played once and I was playing at like 125 or something like that, and it really like sucks the energy. Like it can work, you know, but I'm not Andrew Weatherall, and I'm not that experienced at working at lower tempos. Actually, that's sort of a lie. Like most of my computer music, I often actually start like 120, or I sometimes will go lower. But in this system, this live system, I've been playing at like 135 and north of that, and it works. But kicks out. Oh, because the downbeat of that pattern is in a different place. Occupational hazard, isn't it? Oh, in my mind that just slipped into time. Duh, duh. I think it becomes all the more important that you've set up like slow modulation of your parts as well to keep your parts interesting, which I kind of haven't. Like that's something that we should talk about, which is the idea of like using like VCAs to change the volume and using like slow modulation. I've got the Ochd now, and like it is really important to have a tiny bit of modulation going to things to keep them alive. I have certain things available to me, like the pulse width modulation of my Dixie is actually coming from this stages here. Hear it there. Just to like pulse width modulate it, keep it alive. And the Jove second CV input is getting a really slow LFO, which I'm pretty sure comes from Pamela. And that is slowly opening and closing the plats, like voice, over time. And that's something that as an idea that has been in my mind from playing around with this synthesizer app on my phone, where there's like a sound that I've been messing around with where I have like a slow tube bar like thing. It's what I played Mogfest using. And so having that slow modulation over 2 or 3 bars where it just slowly brings it up and slowly brings it down, like that just helps you loads. That it's doing that. You can just focus on other stuff. And having the Ochd in is kind of an exercise in thinking, well, what can I modulate with the Ochd? You know, and I'm not honestly there yet. Like I only just recently got this and I've started plumbing it into things. And just the way that the Ochd was developed, which is that Ben had some things being modulated and it was all tuned by ear. You need to use it by ear as well. You know, it's like, what gives me the most interesting modulation over time? I can't really tell you what that is. Because it's dependent on your voices, and you might not want to also modulate things loads, but definitely things like the morph parameter and plats. Like I actually have got one of the channels of the I've got it going into the FM input. That's the Ochd modulating plats. If I fed that into the morph. That's quite good. Oh, okay. trimmer for the bass. I do use like things like the Abstract Data ADE60 to like trim things. So yeah, in answer to your question, Andrew, you just try. Definitely a better modulation going into the morph. Ooh, bit loud. Becomes quite nice having two kick drums, but if you get a toppy kick drum with a squid and it interacts with your existing kick, it can work really well, but not always. Shouldn't take things away quickly, but sometimes it works. You know what you're looking for. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's coming on, and it's like coagulating. It's like congealing, I would say. So I try not to like mess with this too much, and I'm not wanting to like throw the baby out with the bathwater, and like it's tempting to just sort of tear everything up and be like, yeah, don't like it. I'll just like try something completely different. I am thinking about the idea of different sequences and having like completely different tuned parts. Obviously my current trick is using one sequencer to control all three voices. It's a question. There is one other thing to talk about very quickly, which was Densher on Patreon asks, how do you tune your voices? And that's actually something that lots and lots of people have asked. Like, how do you tune all three voices in relationship to each other? I've kind of blazed past it in other videos, and perhaps we should talk a little bit about it in this one. And I'll just show you kind of what I do. There's no science. I am not a very like classically trained musician by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just not. And so everything that I've done, I've taught myself, and I've done by ear. So that's what I'm doing here. I am just literally going by ear Fundamentally, your pitch sequencer or your quantizer probably have scales in them. And so currently, at the moment, I'm using the Dorian scale with a root note of C, although D I've sometimes messed around with. And that's creating interesting intervals, voltage offsets, which are being sent out, which are Dorian voltage offsets, in a certain root note. And it's up to you how you tune your oscillators in relationship to that. The accurate and right way will be to use a guitar tuner. And if I look under the drawer, oh, look, I have a guitar tuner. And so one with an input will allow you to send a direct feed from your oscillators into it. And by turning on these bad boys, this can't hear my modular, but it would with a cable. So the sort of correct way of tuning your system would be to know what voltage your pitch quantizer or your sequencer is outputting. In this instance, I know because Metropolis is telling me it's outputting C0 and G0, which are the lowest C's and G's on the keyboard. If I move this up, you'll see that it's like C1, F1, F1, G1. So it's telling you I'm outputting that exact pitch. And the tuner is telling you what actual pitch your oscillators are outputting. So what you do is you feed the output of your Metropolis, in this instance, into the 1 volt per octave input of your oscillator. The output of your oscillator goes into the tuner, and you turn the big dial so that the offset is correct. And so if it says F1, G1, you are getting F1, G1 on your oscillator. That would be the correct way of doing it. That would mean that the relationship between the two things was exact and you were getting a predictable voltage. But that's incompatible entirely with the way that I work my system, because what I'm doing is that I am using a cluster of oscillators, multiple oscillators at different intervals. And in terms of how I design those intervals, it's done completely by ear. So what I would do is start with plats, and I would put plats on like a very basic mode. So that's the lowest note that is being outputted by my sequencer, and that's plats, open. And then what I would do is probably load up my bass. This one. Then I'll hear they're in tune. But plats is much higher than the bass. Now I do have a Beast chalkboard module in between, which is allowing me to offset the pitch of plats. But across the whole scale, I should be happy that it is in tune. Quick word is that sometimes you might find that at 1 octave you're in tune on your oscillators, but at others you are not. It drifts out over time, and that's because your oscillator or your sequencer are not properly calibrated. Read the manuals when it comes to calibration. Don't just start calibrating things, like trying to work things out, because there are trimmers around the backs of these modules where you can adjust that. Okay, and then the third thing, 303. There you go. And there's nothing scientific here. I'm literally listening to that. I'm like, do they all sound like they're in tune with each other? Do they all sound harmonious? So what Stevio would do is like change that, so you'd be like, up a fifth. You could try that. Does a fifth do cool things? this is the idea, is you're doing it by ear. And then once you sort of move on to different modes on plats, like this, you know that it's like correctly tuned. So it's just about getting the relationship that you like, and then by triggering them differently at different times and different pitches, stuff happens. But yeah, you're free to like change that tuning. You may want to like do something weird, like that sounds slightly weird. So yeah, that's a slightly weirder variant. And it might work. So yes, Densha, in answer to your question, like tuning is just done by ear. I am not classically trained. I just like felt this out, and then you just play test it. Like, does that work? Just play, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, you'll know very quickly. So I hope that's helpful. This is a bit of a like in between stage. I've made like a bunch of changes, but I don't want to make too many. And it's time to just kind of consolidate and like reinforce what's good about this thing. We're going to mess around. I want in the sort of coming months to play around with small systems. And it's something that I will use as a way of talking about different ideas, about different kinds of modulars, different approaches, as this thing sort of congeals into a gelatinous, joyful mass of joy. And I'm also going to show you the Squid Sample in more detail. There will be a video of this. So if you're interested in the themes and ideas behind live performance, I have done like so much stuff about this at this point. I've got a lecture about that, and I've got lots of other videos that explore my case at very different points. So if you want more case walkthroughs, I will link those below. And if you want to just hear live sets of this thing, those are also below. Please just go below and have a look. And Thank you. If you enjoy these things and want to support the continuation of them, please consider sponsoring me on Patreon. That is the best way to do this. And of course, subscribe and tell your mates. And thank you for watching once again. I'll see you next time. Bye.